and I'll kick it off.
All right.
Welcome, everyone. Before we dive in, I want to go over a few quick housekeeping items. To ensure a smooth presentation, everyone will be muted throughout the session. Feel free to submit your questions in the chat section at the bottom of your screen. We'll answer them at the end. If you have a question you'd prefer to keep private, you can email us directly after the webinar. You'll find our email addresses on the last slide. Don't worry about taking notes. A recording and copy of the presentation will be emailed to everyone who registered after the webinar. Now let's get started. My name is Matt Charvat, and I'm the founder and president of Charvat Consulting. We are a total rewards consulting firm passionate about helping organizations achieve their vision. For over 20 years, I've been guiding companies to build compensation and benefit programs that align with their strategic goals. We help companies design total rewards programs to attract top talent, drive performance, and support their overall business strategy.
Perfect. And I'm Kelly Boyd. I'm with the career consultancy firm. I started this company about 7 months ago after working in recruitment for almost 15 years. 6 of those were at Indeed, where I worked on tons of job seeker programs. So I speak with job seekers every day. I'm super passionate. I've helped people, everyone from former felons and women in crisis centers, just really disadvantaged communities, all the way to executives of hospitals. So I have a vast amount of experience in helping people find jobs, and I absolutely love it. And yeah, and so me and Matt used to work together at University of Maryland, and so we thought we'd combine forces because I get asked questions about compensation probably every day, if not every day, 5 days a week at least.
Thanks, Kelly. So today we're going to do a compensation question and answer webinar, be led by you. But first, we want to tackle a few questions that Kelly and I receive on a regular basis when it comes to compensation. Try to provide some in-depth answers, and then we'll open it up for the question and answer section. So feel free to type your questions in the comments section at the bottom of your screen, and we'll answer them at the end as well. So the first question we get a lot is, how do I know if I am being underpaid? There are multiple factors to consider with this question. The first is internal signs. Have your responsibilities increased without a raise? This can be a red flag, especially if the colleagues with similar workloads are paid more. Are your performance reviews not aligning with your compensation? Do your performance reviews consistently highlight strong performance, yet your salary increases seem stagnant? This disconnect might indicate your value isn't being reflected in your pay. Is your pay lower compared to your colleagues? While discussing salaries can be tricky, discreetly gathering information about colleagues' compensation within your department or with similar experience can be an eye-opener. Significant pay discrepancies for comparable roles could suggest underpayment.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Matt. Yeah, so at Indeed, we had this website, or we had this app called Blind, and you could, it was for tech companies, and you could go and you could speak anonymously about your salary. So Indeed kind of went on this push of share your pay. So we all started doing it on Blind, this app, and then it became this huge uproar because even though Indeed is very big on salary transparency, we were realizing like, you know, that people had been there for a long time. You know how it is. You are at a company for a long time, you get the 3% increase or whatever it is. And so it was a huge eye opener, and it caused a huge shift in how we do pay at Indeed. So, I mean, talking amongst your colleagues, even though it seems like it seems like dangerous territory, it could be instrumental in increasing your pay and getting the company, like forcing their hand to change their policy.
Right. So the important takeaway there is that discussing your pay with your colleagues is not illegal, and there's nothing that your company can do with repercussions if you're doing that, right? So.
Oh, that's such a great point. Yeah.
Feel free to talk about it discreetly. You don't want to You don't want to do anything or say anything that will get you in trouble or may put you in a bad light or anything, but it's perfectly normal and acceptable to talk about your pay. So the second factor to consider with how do I know if I'm being underpaid is external market research, right? So you want to utilize reputable salary surveys and reports specific to your industry, location, and job title. These resources provide benchmarks for average compensation, including base salaries, bonuses, and benefits. So you also want to review job postings for similar positions in your area. This can give you a sense of the salary range employers are offering for comparable roles, helping you gauge your market value. So the important takeaway there is you want to make sure that the research you're doing is accurate and is used in a way that is not self-reported data, right? When I talk about benchmark data and salary surveys, it's very important that we're not looking at self-reported data. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to go to somewhere like salary.com and use that as the golden rule, right? We'll use that as a gauge, but most professionals are going to use market data, and so there are free market services out there. One that's very good is the ONET, which is run by the Department of Labor, and every organization is required to submit compensation data to the Department of Labor. So you can trust that as a good gauge when it comes to the salaries. And the Department of Labor is also very good with showing you the different percentiles, right? So they'll go all the way from the 10th percentile, which means that 10% of people are making lower than this rate, all the way up to the 90th percentile, which means that 90% of the people are making lower than this rate. So it's always a good gauge to use those free resources out there.
Yeah, I think that's
Kelly,
a good call out. Well, yeah, sorry, I think that's a good call out, especially, and that's a good reminder, because to me, I kind of forgot about those, the Department of Labor. I was thinking, I know a lot of people use salary.com and things like that. So no, really, really good call out there. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, sure. And so the third factor to consider with, how do I know if I'm being underpaid is personal feelings, right? If you're feeling undervalued or disengaged at work, this could be a sign that your compensation doesn't reflect your contributions and could be impacting your overall job satisfaction, right? If you know that you're well paid or you think you're well paid, you're not going to think about it, right? Mm-hmm. If this is something that you're constantly thinking about or constantly worrying about, then there's a good chance that you either are underpaid. So we always say trust your gut, right? So right. This is one of those things where trust your gut. If your gut's telling you that something doesn't feel right, something probably isn't right. Mm-hmm. So remember, right, compensation is a total package. Consider your entire compensation package, including benefits, health insurance, retirement contributions, and paid time off when evaluating your pay. Mm-hmm. If you believe you're underpaid, gather your evidence, such as market research, job posting, performance reviews, and be prepared to negotiate and have that conversation with your leader. There's nothing. The worst thing that they can do is say no, right? Right,
because you can't get. Well, I mean, you shouldn't be let go if you ask for a raise, and especially if you present a valid argument. And I always say, bring as much documentation as you can, show what you've been contributing and why you would deserve, why it makes sense for the company to invest more money in you.
Correct.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. So next question we get a lot. What do I say when an employer asks me what I want to be paid? So I've got a couple answers for this, highlighting a couple different things, right? So the first way to answer the question during an interview with a potential employer is what I like to say, shift the focus and gather information. So you can say something like, thank you for asking. To best answer your question, I'd love to learn more about the compensation package for this role. Can you share details about the base salary range, bonus structure, and any benefits offered? This approach allows you to gather information about the employer's budget while subtly indicating you're looking for a complete total rewards package. Right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The second way to answer the question is to provide a range based on the research that you've already done, right? So you can say, based on my research and experience, the typical compensation range for this position in this area is between X and Y. And you have to make sure that you know what that X and Y is with your research. However, I'm flexible depending on the specifics of the benefits package and the overall opportunity. So this demonstrates your knowledge of the market, your understanding of your value, and your willingness to negotiate based on additional details. So it's important to remember that while base salary is a huge indicator of the job, a lot of jobs offer other benefits that may be more enticing than base salary alone. And so you, as a potential employer, need to weigh those facts out, right? Maybe you take a lower base salary, but you've got huge benefits, right? So maybe they 100% pay for your benefits, or you get 5 weeks of paid time off, or they're going to pay for your schooling or something like that, or they'll pay for your children's schooling. I know if you're working for an educational institution, you know, you get free tuition to a college or a university for your children, which doesn't sound like a huge benefit when you're young and you're just starting out. But as you mature in your career and you have kids and you have a significant other that wants to go back to school, that benefit then becomes a lot more valuable, right?
When I first moved to DC, Baltimore and DC, in Texas, we never pay for parking. I've never heard of paying for parking, especially in Houston. It's probably different now, but this is 2012. And I found out I took a job. It was $33,000 a year because it was mostly commission, and it was $33,000 like your first year, and then after that, 100% commission. And I found out, and it was on Pennsylvania Avenue, so in DC. So the parking was exorbitant, and then I found out that they didn't pay for parking, and so I was like, I'm losing money by working here. So I mean, really, you got to know the you have to know the area. I mean, I didn't stay there long because I was like, I'm literally going to be losing money because the parking was so expensive. And I found out a lot of other people had negotiated parking into their salary, but I had no idea. So I think it's, especially if you're moving somewhere new, it's really important to kind of think about those ins and outs too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always good to negotiate those things that you might not think are important, but you know, everything is negotiable in this part of this scenario, right? Let's see. So another way to answer this question, to highlight your value. So in this instance, you'd say something like, I'm confident I can bring significant value to this role based on my, you know, and then you mention your specific skills or experience. Considering my qualifications and the impact I can make, I believe a salary in the range of, you know, X is fair. And again, when you want to be very clear when you're throwing out a number for them that it's reasonable and it's based on your research, because a lot of their follow-up questions could be like, you know, how do you know that's fair, or, you know, how did you come to that number? And that's where you go back to the other question we talked about, is where you're doing your research. You know, you can say, hey, I've looked at some postings, or I know based on, you know, this market tool or this benchmark data that I have, that here's the typical range for this job in this area. And, you know, based on my skills and abilities, I'm probably at the mid or the higher range of that. And so, you know, you want to be confident with how you're saying this and how you're addressing this, and the company will probably or hopefully will understand that.
Yeah.
Kelly, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's great. I've also heard people say, you know, I'm targeting roles that are paying this amount. How do you feel about that? Like, you know, based on my experience, I'm targeting roles that pay between 150 and 180,000. I've heard that's a good approach as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. It's always good to be upfront with what your expectations are, right? You don't want to go too far into a negotiation if that's what your expectation is when you're taking the job or when you're interviewing for the job, and they come back with an offer of like $50,000, and that's kind of insulting to you, and it kind of wastes your time and their time. So it's good to be upfront
Right.
about your expectations. Yeah, I mean, I would always say, don't shoot for a job because you think it pays a lot, right?
Right.
Shoot for a job that you do, and the money will come, right? Because you want to always enjoy the job that you're doing.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's a fine approach.
Good tip. Thanks, Matt.
Yep. And then the last thing I would say with this question is, be open to negotiation, right? You can say, like, I'm open to discussing compensation further, and I'm confident that we can reach a mutually beneficial agreement. Like, this conveys your willingness to negotiate while expressing confidence in reaching a fair outcome. I think it's important that you know what you're worth, and that you convey that to the company that you're interviewing with, that you're confident in what you're worth, right? So key takeaways: do your research. Before you go to an interview, research average salaries for the position that you're interviewing for in your field and in your location. So, that's the information that'll be the foundation for setting a realistic range. Practice your responses, right? Rehearse answering not only salary questions, but all interview questions beforehand to ensure you're sound, confident, and prepared, right? And then the other thing is, during a salary negotiation, you have to be prepared to walk away. So if what they're offering isn't in line with what you're looking for, or it's lower than what you think you're worth or what the job is worth, be prepared to politely decline and continue your job search. You don't want to feel like you've settled for a position that's lower than what you think you're worth, because that's not going to set you up for success in that job.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I'll talk to job seekers sometimes, and they're like, well, I mean, they say that the range is between this and that. And I'll ask, well, did they talk about like a senior opportunity or something? Because they're like, I'm hoping that, after they meet me, then they'll be able to offer more. And I'm like, well, is there a senior opportunity? Is there a higher pay band? Because if not, that probably is all they're able to offer, especially if they were pretty transparent about the role. So I've had job seekers that have gone through the entire job or the entire interview process, and then at the end, they're like, they really weren't able to budge, and then it just wastes everyone's time too. So I think that's such a great point. Like, know your worth, do your research, and be prepared to walk away.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you brought up too. If they're being transparent about what their range is, they're doing it because they're transparent about what their range is, and there's probably no more wiggle room at the top, right? And so they're doing that as a service to everyone. They don't want to waste your time. They don't want to waste their time. If it's, a lot of companies nowadays are being very transparent with their ranges, and that's good. But the takeaway is, like, that's their range.
Yeah, right? Especially if they say we're only budgeted for this, they're probably not going to be able to find other money. So, and especially I feel like in healthcare, they're very, very cognizant of their budgets. In tech, they were kind of printing money sometimes, it felt like, but in healthcare, it's so different. I mean, like, what I could offer was what I could offer. And especially if they have a salary grid or something like that, like I could tell you 5 years of experience, this is what we're going to pay you. And then like, it just is disheartening at the end where they're like, oh, but, and I'm like, again, this is what we can pay you. So.
Yeah, good. All right, next question that I have: how do I know what other industries are paying if I want to make a job change? So again, this is another question that we get a lot. So here are some effective ways to find out what other industries are paying for your skills if you're considering a career change, right? Online resources. Again, utilize reputable salary comparison websites like the Department of Labor. These platforms allow you to search by job title, location, and specific skill sets to see the average salary ranges across various industries. The reports are compiled by company-reported data, not self-reported data from individuals. So you don't want to use websites like salary.com or glassdoor.com because the results are mostly self-reported. With self-reported data, we tend to see inflated numbers because it's human nature to report things like bonuses, shift differentials, and other things, even though the website is only asking for your base hourly rate or your regular pay, right?
Yeah, such a good point.
So another way to obtain industry data is through professional associations and search firms, right? They often publish industry-specific salary reports. So you want to look for reports that are related to the industry you're interested in. And these can provide valuable insights into the compensation trends and typical pay ranges for different roles. The other thing to do is to explore your job boards and postings that specialize in the industry you're targeting. So reviewing job postings for similar positions will give you a sense of the salary range employers are offering, even if you don't apply. Right, we're starting to see a lot of job boards require companies to post ranges for their jobs. If the range is too large, I'm gonna tell you it's not relevant.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ways that companies are getting around this mandate by job boards is to post these huge ranges. So you may see a job for like an admin assistant with a range that says $40,000 to $150,000. That's just an unrealistic range. So you want to focus your efforts on postings that have a realistic range, right? What is a realistic range? I would say it's a range spread of about $30,000 or less, depending on the job. You know, in the admin assistant example, if the range posted says between 40 and 60, I think that's probably a realistic range for that job, right? So I'm seeing companies too on these mandated job postings that they post these huge ranges for positions because they know that people search based on what the pay is. And so on this job, like the admin assistant, that they say 40 to 150,000, that 150,000 is unrealistic, but they know they're going to get people that are saying, I don't want to make less than 150,000, that job's going to pop up now on their search. So what are your thoughts on that, Kelly?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And if you think about it, like I always think about getting a new job, like buying a house, like you know your range, like like yeah, you might want to flex up a little bit, but you know what you can afford. And it's kind of the same when you're looking for jobs too. But you know, I could go down a whole analogy path on that. Like I'm always like, you know, when you buy a house, you have all these things you really want, you know, and then but maybe you have to go without the pool to get the school district you want. Like same thing with compensation, benefits, and the job, you know, and the title. You got to think about the whole package. So again, I could kind of go down that rabbit hole, but I think about the same thing. Like, you know what you can afford, you know what you need to make, you know what you're worth. I mean, at least within a range. So be realistic. And I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, agreed. So the other thing that I will say is don't underestimate the power of networking, right? So reach out, connect with your professionals currently working in the industry that you're interested in. LinkedIn is a great platform for finding connections. You can see if you can schedule some informational interviews to learn more about their roles, their compensation package, and the overall career landscape in that industry. I know I've had people reach out to me. I'm more than happy to talk about things, you know, with any of my contacts or connections. It's something that, you know, I live and breathe this stuff, so it's not a secret for me. The other thing is to join industry-specific professional associations, right? So, you know, if I'm in HR, I want to join SHRM, which is the Society of Human Resource Management. That opens up different opportunities and networking events, right? Also, those organizations often offer salary surveys and resources that can help you shed light on compensation trends within that field, right? Oftentimes, you know, they'll hold free webinars, lunch and learns, or other meetings around topics like salaries and benefits. So it's always important to reach out, network. You're not alone in this. There are other people that are doing the exact same thing that you are and having the same questions that you are. And there are people out there that are always willing to help,
Yeah, absolutely. And so a group of my like 7 best friends at Indeed, we all started together. We're all still in a group chat, but every single time one of us got a job offer or was looking elsewhere, we would immediately say, okay, this is what they're paying, this is what their benefit package was, because we built that transparency. And granted, we're recruiters, so it is a little different because we're used to talking salary every day. But I mean, it was invaluable. Like because of our conversations, one of my friends was able to negotiate an extremely high salary because she had proof and she had at least anecdotal information. And she knew the initial offer was pretty low compared to what other people were making. So, I mean, truly the power of talking to folks that do the same thing as you, talking to folks in your same industry, talking to folks who know compensation or know recruitment. I mean, it's such a great resource to lean into.
Agreed. So that's all we have.
Yeah.
What are your questions, right?
Well, I don't think my
I'm
mother's going to
looking.
have any. She is retired. But yeah, I mean, I feel like those are the things that I get asked about the most every day. So I really appreciate your attention to all of those and your insight because I kind of forgot about some of those things too. So,
Sure. So I've got a couple other ones that I get a lot that I can kind of
oh, I'd
quickly
love that.
hit on, right? One of the questions that can be like, when should I negotiate my salary
Oh,
in an
right.
interview? And so I think we kind of talked about this earlier. It's generally expected to negotiate your salary during the offer stage. However, if the salary is mentioned earlier in the interview process and it's significantly below your expectations, feel free to politely inquire about the range or express your desired range. And again, if the range that they're offering is significantly lower than what you think the job is worth or what you think you're worth, be prepared to walk away, right? Some of the things, should I always ask for the salary range up front? Not always necessary, but it can be helpful to understand the range before investing significant time in the interview process, right? You can politely inquire about the compensation structure during the initial stages. Let's see, what if the offered salary is below the market rate? So if you have strong qualifications and believe you deserve more, politely negotiate or explain your value proposition, why you believe the offer doesn't reflect your worth. Be prepared to counter with your research and your rationale. Any other questions that you kind of get, Kelly?
Well, do you have any suggestions for raises or internal movements? Because as you know, sometimes internal movements come with, a certain amount increase. Or, do you have any suggestions for once you already have the job and how you can negotiate a raise or a merit increase? Or, I mean, is there anything that you could offer around that?
Yeah, those are really good questions. So typically, I'll say companies usually are pretty structured with
Right.
how jobs are graded and their structure. And historically or typically, these companies will provide a salary increase for a promotion that's commensurate with the different level, right? So I would say without knowing what the levels are, it's usually about 5 or 6% per level that you're going up.
Mm-hmm.
I think is a standard promotional thing, right? If you're going from a staff position to a supervisory position, I think you'd want to negotiate probably around 12 to 15% of an increase,
Mm-hmm.
from where your staff level was, anywhere up to like 20%. Again, I think the important thing is to be realistic with what your expectation is,
Yeah.
and any of those things, right? And even if a company comes back and says, "Here's our standard rate," you can always say, "Can you do a little better?" Or, "I was kind of looking for this," or something like that. And how they answer that question, or will give you a lot of insight into the company.
Yeah.
Everything's negotiable. Most companies try to keep that internal equity as well.
Well, that's what I was thinking too, is so at a lot of companies, the recruiters will have internal equity. At in tech companies, I didn't have it. And so it was very different than healthcare, where you can see, or at least I could always see everything. But internal equity, for those who don't know, it's you can see what everyone is making based on their years of experience, essentially, like for layman's terms, I guess. And so in healthcare, we were very big on it. Every healthcare system I've worked for, we're very big on it. Other industries, not as big. So there's certain industries I feel like where your hands are a little bit more tied than others. But yeah, internal equity usually comes in play. Budget always comes in play. And then, yeah, that's kind of what you got to remember, I guess. You know, there's only so much sometimes that the recruiters in compensation can do.
Yep. No, agreed. So one other question I get, sorry, is what benefits are most important to negotiate for? I know you
Oh,
talked
that's a good one.
about in one of your other jobs, you know, the free parking, right? So I think realistically it depends on your individual needs, right? So, you know, maybe it's health insurance. Maybe it, you know, maybe a company can negotiate for a fully funded or fully paid health insurance. Maybe it's time off, paid time off, right? So if the company comes back and says the standard package is, you know, 3 weeks of vacation, maybe, you know, you want to negotiate more. So that's one. Retirement plan contributions. I don't know how much you can negotiate on that front. Usually they're mandated by the IRS, but it's always good to ask. And then in this day and age, flexible work arrangements. It's a big thing that I get a lot. You know, can I work from home? Can I work remote? How often do I have to be in the office now? And so all that stuff is negotiated for, that you can negotiate for, but it's really your personal preference, right? So maybe you don't care about being in the office, but you want more time off, or maybe you're willing to give a couple days of your PTO if you can work from home more often. So again, the important, you know, what benefits are most important to negotiate for? It's your individual preference is the answer.
Yeah, that's a good point. I had a client ask me about negotiating PTO, and I was like, normally it's a company policy. I haven't, nowhere I worked, you could negotiate that. But I mean, I'm sure there's companies out there. It's just the companies I worked at, it was set policy. So, but yeah, I mean, and 401k, I feel like that one's more kind of, or retirement contribution. I feel like that one's a little bit more set in stone. But the one I feel like people have the most wiggle room with is definitely the remote work and how many days remote. I feel like people can usually negotiate that one the easiest. But you know, shoot for the stars.
Yeah, but like that is such a new topic and trend. If you'd have asked me 5 years ago what was something that people negotiate a lot for, I don't think flexible working or working from home would have even come on my radar.
Right.
And you know, since COVID, it's been such a shift in how companies treat their workforce. So it's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially when I was working tech, because there were just a few positions that were required on site. We had only 1% of the company was required to be on site every day. And so, boy, howdy, was that 1% trying to constantly negotiate days to work remote. And yeah, it was interesting, but
good.
That's it.
Cool. All right. So, thank you for joining Kelly and I. Our contact information is up on the screen now. So if you want to reach out to us with specific questions, or you just want to say hi, see what we're up to, feel free to reach out. Yeah, Kelly, do you have anything else to add, or?
Yeah, I just appreciate y'all watching the recording and little snippets and joining in, those who did. And Matt, I really appreciate your time. I've always appreciated all your insights. So I really appreciate you spending time with us tonight.
Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate you too.
Good.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording now.